Naldi, and I'm Professor of Education at LaSalle University and a founding member of the Coalition for Equity, Diversity, and Disabilities. We welcome everybody today to our webinar called From Online Open House to Collaborative Conversations and a Focus on Advocacy. So welcome everybody, we're happy you're here. A couple of housekeeping things before we move on. Please check your chat box for the link to our resources and to our activities, and I will move on to our agenda. Today, we have a welcome and Zoom orientation. We'll also have introductions and purpose, some poll questions for you to learn about you and to see how our coalition can continue to provide you with benefits and information as well as professional development. We'll have some presentations by the members of the CEDD board in terms of advocacy and supporting English learners with disabilities. We'll go into a small group breakout discussion, and we hope to learn there about your special needs and your practices that are happening right now. Then we'll come back together for a short closing and more information on our next meeting. Again, welcome. The Coalition for Equity, Diversity, and Disability was founded by several of us that are in this call today, including the organizations of MATSL, MABE, and LaSalle University, with supporting members from UMass Lowell, MIRA, UMass Boston, Mass Advocates for Children, Federation for Children with Special Needs, and the Mass Council for Exceptional Children Division. Our purpose is to form a coalition of interdisciplinary collaboration to address the needs of linguistically and culturally diverse students with disabilities and their families. And this is all of our passion and our goal, to be able to bring to you what we need to help you do your job best. Our goals are to bring the voices of students, families, and educators to the development and implementation of the policies, practices, and initiatives impacting students with disabilities, to impact opportunities, achievements, and outcomes in programming services for this diverse group of students with disabilities. And our last goal is to improve the supports and services for diverse students with disabilities. The purpose of today's meeting is to focus on advocacy and how that advocacy can help us meet the needs of bilingual learners with or at risk for disabilities. We are excited to get to know where you are, and we're excited to share our own expertise from the coalition. This meeting is the first one of 3 session series, particularly focused on advocacy. Today, we'll begin an initial conversation of what is advocacy and to share a common understanding. Session 2, which will be forthcoming in the next few weeks, is on advocacy in pursuit of social justice. And the last webinar would be part 3, which would be focused on effective advocacy within the reality of schools. Today's topics are, again, advocacy and advocacy or service, definition, advocacy, what are the key components of advocacy, advocacy for who, and the basic ethical tenets of advocacy. Which after we will get together into break rooms and be able to interact and learn how this information impacts your everyday activity and communication with families and students. I will pass on the microphone to our next presenter right now.
Hello, thank you for joining us. Welcome everyone. I hope that everyone is well. Thank you for joining our discussion about advocacy today. So we're going to start off by seeing who's in the room. So we have our first poll here, and we're asking you to share a bit about your role in your school district organization community. And if you don't see your specific role here, or let's say you wear more than one hat, multiple hats like a lot of us do, you can add to our chat box some of the way that you identify your role. So I see here now we have about almost half of our participants have completed our poll number 1. Looks like we have a lot of ESL teachers. We have special educators. We have dual language educators, SEI teachers, speech and language pathologists or specialists. Okay. Looks like the majority of you have added. Okay. So it looks here like about a third of our participants are ESL teachers. We also have dual language educators. We have special educators and SEI educators, and again, SLPs as well, so thank you. And it looks like we also have instructional coaches, language acquisition coach, third grade gen ed inclusion teachers with many multilingual, bilingual learners, first grade, general educator. Let's see here. Very nice. Thank you so much. Continue, please, to add to the chat, and we will be saving the chat as well. So please feel free to continuously add to the chat if you have any questions or if you have anything to add to the conversation. So we're going to go ahead and move on to poll number 2. So if we look here at poll number 2, we are looking at in which setting do you work or provide support? So we have SEI classrooms, ESL classrooms, provide support at the school or district level within the community. We have TBE classrooms, dual language. And again, if you have another setting here, or if you provide services or support services in any way, and it's not, the options are not listed here, you maybe have something up in other, you can add that to the chat as well, so we can see where you are providing services or support. Looks like almost, okay. Well, it looks here, looks like we have a significant amount, almost half of our participants coming from the school and district level. And also too, 10% of our participants are coming from the community as well. So we're going to move on to our poll number 3. And our poll number 3 right here is going to have 4 different prompts. And right now we are going to kind of gauge where you are in your role in advocacy and your understanding of what advocacy is. So we look at advocacy in terms of, are these prompts related to advocacy itself, or are they more of a service? Okay, and we're going to go into a little bit what the difference is a little later on, but right now we're just kind of gauging your understanding right now. And so it looks right now to be that quite a few of you are starting to respond to prompt 1. You join a group that helps build houses for the poor. Advocacy or service? We have prompt number 2. You organize and agitate to get a proportion of apartments in a new development designated as low to moderate income housing. We have quite a few of you responding to that one now. We look at prompt 3. You spend your Saturdays helping sort out goods at a recycling center. Is that advocacy or is it a service? And then we have our final, which is you hear that land use for the recycling center is going to be closed down, and you band together with many others to get the city to preserve the site, or you find a new one. Some of you even think about blocking bulldozers if necessary. So it looks like we have almost all participants have responded. So let's see some of these responses. Okay, so number 1, you join a group. Yes, it is a service. Number 2, you organize and agitate. That is advocacy. Number 3, you spend your Saturdays. That is a service. And number 4, you hear that land use for recycling center. That is advocacy. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the difference of between service and advocacy right now. And I'm going to go ahead and hand that over to Robai.
Hey, is somebody, okay, there we go. Okay, hi everybody. It looks like from the preceding poll, looks like most of us have an idea what advocacy entails. So just basically, when we're looking at the definition of advocacy, what is given to us here, and there are various definitions, but the bottom line, it speaks to taking an action or actually speaking in favor of or recommending or arguing for a cause that supports or defends or pleads on behalf of others. And then when we look at who an advocate is, in this definition, it just says a person who argues or recommends or supports a cause or a policy. So when we combine the definition of what is advocacy and who is an advocate, we realize that the definition is not exclusive to a group of people or a certain group of people. It just means that if you are in a position that you can speak on behalf of somebody or a group of people that cannot speak for themselves, then you can consider yourself an advocate. And it's interesting that when we started planning for this session, it was before the current events that are going on in the country, but with what is going on in the country, a lot of people are coming to the table trying to figure out how can they be of support. And all of us here meeting in this meeting and working with students in schools, students who are bilingual learners, students with disabilities, we are well positioned to be advocates and having our voices to speak on behalf of this particular group of students as teachers and or special education teachers, administrators, or whatever role you find yourself in the school system. And so pretty much looks like most of us have an idea of what that is. And so what we look at is look at the second part of this definition. What are the major components of advocacy? So when you're an advocate, and many of us might have an understanding of this, first of all, to be an effective advocate, you have to have an understanding of the issue at hand. So for example, if you are working with a student who's a bilingual learner as an EL teacher, and the issue that arises, you have to have a clear understanding of what the specific issue, if it has to it pertains to a student not receiving the services they need, if they need to be in an inclusive setting and they're not in an inclusive setting, you need to have some good information about the topic, the specific issue, but not only that, the child also and the family situation. And in doing so, you are also, that leads you to being able to identify and connect with anybody within the realm of the situation of the issue that would be an ally with you. For example, again, if you are primarily an ESL teacher working with students, bilingual learners, and when you understand the issue and you understand where the child is and the family, then you look around and find possibly special education teacher could be an ally because they are advocating for those same issues or the same child like you are. So when you do that, it leads to the next point where you anticipate and prepare concerns and challenges. So in this point here, you're thinking through what are some of the things, what are some of the possible pushbacks or that you will get as you are advocating for the specific issue that is arising. And the next thing you do at that point is encourage collaborative dialogue. So looking at all the stakeholders or the allies and trying to bring them together so that you're all in the same tune and trying to work through the issue at the same time with a clear common understanding. And finally, as an advocate, you have to realize that you might have specific goals that you want to achieve that are pertaining to the issue to benefit the child, but then you have to realize that you might not get everything that you're looking for. And so an effective advocate is a person that really understands that they might not get everything that they need, but be ready to for creative solutions as long as the bottom line of the issue at hand is being addressed and for the benefit of the student or the child at hand. And I guess I'll hand over to the next participant who will be actually speaking specifically to that issue where it comes to who it is that you are advocating for.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I am happy to be here and to be addressing the advocacy for who. As we're looking for who are we talking about within the context that we are focusing on in our schools, our fundamental loyalty has to be our commitment to the student, to the child. And that always has to be foremost in our minds, no matter what our actions and what are our decisions. And even though when we say this and we read this, it seems extremely obvious that this is what it's all about, there are different situations and challenges that sometimes diverge us from having that focus. So if we can go to the next slide, let's do a little reflection. If we look at the basic ethical tenets for advocacy, let's do a little reflection about the last time that you were involved in either writing or in the development of an individualized educational plan for a culturally and linguistically diverse student. So as you're imagining that, as you're thinking about that, think about what was your motivation during that process? Who was your audience? What was your goal? Who were you writing it for? And as you're looking at this and reflecting of this, think then about the following. How would you respond, or how did you respond during this process? Did you design the document primarily to please the child's parents? Were the parents asking for something in a way that was so important for them because it made them feel more comfortable with the outcome, or they were concerned about the stigma that could come with it? Were you designing the document primarily to be in alignment with what you think your supervisors wanted? Sometimes we're in situations where we are told ahead of time or during the meeting that those services do not exist within our district, and that to look for the services, that's going to be too expensive, or that we cannot think about providing services for one particular student when there are so many other students' needs that need to be met. When you were designing the document, were you concerned about, or writing it, keeping in mind budget and available resources? Often this is something, a barrier that is often placed in front of us. When you were designing the document, were you thinking of trying to adhere to the school policy, to follow the standard procedures? Or finally, were you trying to fit the teacher or provider's schedule? Sometimes we need to find a placement or a time to provide the services, and it takes a lot of moving things around, and sometimes we are told, but you know, that is not what fits our schedule right now, and we end up trying to fit the child to what's there rather than what is really needed by that particular child. If in asking and responding to any of these questions, you answered yes, then we basically in that moment sort of forgot our basic ethical tenet of advocacy, that is the child. We put other needs and other issues at the forefront rather than trying to maintain the child as our interest. And it's not that this is easy to do, and it's not that we don't have our challenges, and that's why we're going to be looking at those things further. How can you keep this issue, this ethical tenet on, as the forefront when you have an environment that often is political, there are often other competing factors, and you find yourself in a difficult situation? But as a base of where we're going, this is something that we need to keep in mind. Thank you. So I pass it on to the next person.
So after hearing what Robai and Maria define what advocacy is, and also what are some of the things that we have to keep in mind, we actually want you to get into your small group. So we're going to put you in breakout rooms. So in the breakout room, you should actually discuss these three questions. So we have already shared a Google Doc with you ahead of time. If you missed that on your confirmation, your registration confirmation, we actually included that link in the chat box. So once you get to your group, Claudia, do you mind going to the next slide? Once you get into the group, you will get a notification that you are asked to join a breakout group. And once you're in your group, then choose one of you to be the facilitator. And that facilitator will actually kind of facilitate, the discussion inside of the group. And also you will have a link to get to the Padlet, which allow you to enter your comments, from the group. And we ask that only one of you to do that. So make sure that choose a facilitator. So these are all the links to the Padlets, and all of us will actually circulate among the groups to kind of help you out a little bit. So these are the links to the Padlets too, and we will share with you once we get into the breakout rooms too. So Phyllis, I think we're ready to get to the breakout room.
We had such great conversations in my breakout session. I feel so invigorated and knowing that we can share and advocate with
Mine
each
too.
other as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, we really had like really great conversations too. We were actually, we were cut short.
Same here.
Yeah.
But so just kind of building upon that, the same thing happened in our particular breakout room. And this is good to know because again, this is the initial session, and it's going to be a 3-session series. So it will inform that the work that we're going to be doing for the follow-up sessions as we think of next steps, which is the slide that we're on now. And for now, we will continue to post information on different venues. So we do have the Bilingual Special Education CEDD blog, and you can find it at this particular link, and all of these slides will be available to you. Our Facebook CEDD is still under construction, but you can look for information both on MATSOL as well as MABE's websites. And there's, I believe, dedicated pages, particularly on MABE, as well as Twitter. I have to go on our Twitter page. Okay, Claudia, can we go to the next? Thank you. So this just gives a list of our Coalition for Equity, Diversity, and Disability founding members. Gives you our names as well as the contact information. We love when people contact us. We reach out to you. Again, a lot of this work we're doing is co-generative, generative. And so we want to thank you. Please continue to add your thoughts onto the Padlets. It seems like we all had really powerful conversations during the breakout rooms, and stay tuned because we will be announcing part 2 and part 3, which will probably happen in the fall, perhaps as early as late August or September for part 2. And please, please check out the resources that we have provided. And if you have additional resources, please reach out to us. And we want to thank you all for the work that you do on behalf of families and students. And Claudia, do you want to speak a little bit about the EL SPED certificate?
Yeah, we actually had a couple of teachers that are taking it right now, so that was very exciting. But at LaSalle, we do have a graduate certificate that is fully online, and the courses are 6 weeks long, just talking about the field bilingual special education. Right now, Joni McGee is teaching ELSC 702, Removing Barriers for Classroom Assessment and Instruction of Bilingual Students with Disabilities. And then Sarah Nino, myself, and Maria Serpa will be teaching in July, Assessment for Equity and Inclusion of Bilingual Students with and without Disabilities. And in the fall, we'll begin with the 704 course. You could jump in at any time and you could register directly through that website. The next pages showcase some of the resources that we thought would be very helpful given the content around advocacy for families and resources that have come out from the Department of the Office of Special Education Programs of the U.S. Department of Education. I broke these down into 2 sections. This particular page is for families, so it has resources for virtual IEPs, which I know that is part of the advocacy that we do. And the IRIS modules, which has just completed a supporting learning for parents. So this one would be a good way for you to communicate with your parents about how to support their kids during COVID, particularly if it continues to be some kind of online instruction from home or virtual. And then another couple of websites on emergency and national disasters and how children and families could get support for early education. Those that had those resources in Spanish, I put those in there. The resources for educators working with students with disabilities that also presented again, the Office of Special Education Programs, was Wanda Tai Center for Service for Distance Learning series that helps teachers with resources on how to teach online. The PBIS Behavior Teacher Matrix for Remote Instruction is another one that would help with engagement and behavior in your classes. So I encourage you to look at that one. There's one on transition, and I picked this one because we don't often talk about transition, and transition is not only to adulthood, it could be transition from early childhood to elementary, or for those districts that have K to 4, 4, 5, 6, 7 and up. And then the AIM Center for Resources on Remote Learning, this is a division of CAS that does an incredible job on assistive technology and access via the online education that we're having to do. You could read all of these ideas on the reference that we posted below the number 4. And hopefully those would give you some additional ways to advocate for yourself for the learning that you need to do, for families and resources you could send them, and for your students to be able to engage them in much more effective ways. So again, thank you so much. For that. I actually forgot one more page of for students, families, and communities, so I'm sorry about that. And I wanted just to share that the Mass Advocates for Children has a Meet Val video series, and Val happened to be a student who came to LaSalle for 1 year and then left me, but she is an incredible young woman, professional with autism, who has developed a series of videos on how to get students in high school to become excellent self-advocates. So we really wanted to promote her video series, and it is housed at the Mass Advocates for Children. And of course, the Federation for Children with Special Needs has great tools for families and advocates working towards FAPE. And there's a webinar there, and remote learning and supports for families. So those are kind of the resources for families, for teachers, and then students, families, and communities that we gather for you today as we leave you. And so once again, on behalf of everybody in the Coalition for Education, Diversity, and Disability, we thank you for coming to spend this hour with us. If you have any questions, feel free to email us. And once again, you'll be receiving the link if you have not already seen that with the resource from today. Thank you to all my colleagues. You were all amazing, and for the great conversation that we had with all the professionals in the field. Thank you so much.